Since the court has determined to condemn me, God knoweth how, I will now discharge my mind concerning the indictment and the king's title. The indictment is grounded in an Act of Parliament which is directly repugnant to the law of God and his holy church, the supreme government of which no temporal person may by any law presume to take upon him. This was granted by the mouth of our Saviour, Christ himself, to St. Peter and the bishops of Rome, whilst he lived and was personally present here on earth. It is, therefore, insufficient in law to charge any Christian to obey it. And more to this, the immunity of the Church is promised both in Magna Carta and in the King's own coronation oath. Now we plainly see you are malicious. Not so. I am the King's true subject, and I pray for him and all the realm. I do none harm. I say none harm. I think none harm. And if this be not enough to keep a man alive, then in good faith I long not to live. Nevertheless, it is not for the supremacy that you have sought my blood, but because I would not bend to the marriage. Hello YouTube, Film Buff 06 here, coming your way with a review of the 1966 historical biopic A Man for All Seasons, which was adapted by Robert Bolt from his own award-winning stage play of the same name. It was made on a very low budget of under $2 million. It was produced and directed by Fred Zinnemann, the man responsible for giving us such great Hollywood classics as High Noon and From Here to Eternity, and it stars Paul Scofield, who ended up bagging a Best Actor Oscar for a performance he actually originated on both Broadway and the West End. Wendy, who secured herself a Best Actress nomination, Robert Shaw, who was nominated for Best Supporting Actor for his role in this film way before he went on to become more internationally well known to mainstream audiences for his iconic role as Quint in Jaws. Leo McKern of Rumpole of the Bailey fame, Susannah York, before she became well known for portraying the Man of Steel's mother in the first two Superman films, Nigel Davenport, Corin Redgrave, Orson Welles, John Hurt in his first major film role, and also featuring an uncredited cameo from Vanessa Redgrave. Now, A Man for All Seasons not only became the 5th highest grossing film of that year, but also managed to win 6 Oscars out of 8 overall nominations, including Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Cinematography, Best Costume Design, Best Director, and Best Picture. Now, the producers originally considered Richard Burton and even Laurence Olivier for the lead role of Sir Thomas More, but Zinnemann eventually insisted that they cast Paul Scofield, who they initially feared would not be a big enough name to draw in a movie audience. Now, A Man for All Seasons is set between 1529 and 1535, during the high point of King Henry VIII's reign, and it chronicles the tragic story of the Lord Chancellor Sir Thomas More, who, for religious reasons, he was a Roman Catholic, stood up to the king by resigning from his position and refusing to sign the oath of supremacy that controversially declared Henry the supreme head of the Church of England, thus permitting him to break away from Rome and secure a divorce from his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, in order to marry his mistress at the time, Anne Boleyn, and how this crucial act of defiance ultimately led to More being put on trial, being found guilty of high treason, and sentenced to death by beheading. Now, in order to keep the budget at under $2 million, most of the actors, including Paul Scofield, Susannah York, Orson Welles, and John Hurt, each took salary cuts, with the sole exception being Vanessa Redgrave, who refused to accept any money from the studio. So, what are my thoughts on A Man for All Seasons? Was this film really deserving of the 1966 Oscar for Best Picture? My simplest answer to this question: yes. This is just a perfect movie in and of itself. And this is coming from someone who does have a certain familiarity with Tudor history, but wasn't quite as familiar with Sir Thomas More's story, at least until now. After watching this movie. Speaking of the story, it is extraordinarily compelling without having to rely on big action sequences or grand sword fights stroke battles or a grand soap opera style, love affair. The dialogue is suitably eloquent, very clever, and very philosophical. In normal circumstances, when movies are adapted from stage plays, they could often come across as being a little bit stagey at times. But in this case, Robert Bolt does such an effortless job with adapting his own stage play onto the big screen and also making it feel more cinematic in scope. The pacing is fantastic, and it genuinely made me feel like I was watching a stage play unfold for 2 hours straight when I was watching it. The costume and production design is beautifully well realised and is impressively authentic to the time period. The cinematography from Ted Moore is nothing short of amazing. Georges Delerue score is used very minimally throughout the film, but what there is of it perfectly captures the feel of the Tudor period, especially the opening theme tune, which I thought was brilliant. Fred Zinnemann's direction is excellent, actually some of the best he's ever done. The acting from everyone involved is brilliant. Wendy Hiller does a great job as Alice Moore, especially during the moving scene in the Tower of London where she and the rest of the family have to say goodbye to her husband before his trial and leave the country. Susannah York, Nigel Davenport, Corin Redgrave and Vanessa Redgrave also do great jobs with their respective supporting roles as Margaret Moore, the Duke of Norfolk, William Roper the Younger, and Anne Boleyn. Leo McKern is terrific as Thomas Cromwell. John Hurt does a remarkable job in his debut movie role as Richard Rich. Orson Welles' cameo as Cardinal Wolsey is great. Robert Shaw, who I think should have won the Best Supporting Actor Oscar that year, is enjoyably hammy and over the top as King Henry VIII. Despite the 6 or so minutes of screen time that he had, and also given the fact that his character has a much larger off-screen presence in the film, he also perfectly captures Henry's mannerisms and his famously unpredictable mood swings, and you could clearly tell he was having a ball with this role, especially during his first appearance, where he is about to visit Thomas's house in order to, unsuccessfully try and convince Thomas to change his mind about the divorce, and he accidentally jumps in the mud, which leads into this awkward silence as his sort of lackeys are unsure, how to react to this, only for them to laugh when Henry himself laughs the incident off. I mean, that was great. And also the scene where which was great, and also the scene where Thomas and Henry have their little argument outside the Moore house. I mean, that was which was really intense stuff, really. But, of course, the highlight of the film is Paul Scofield's deservedly Oscar-winning performance as Sir Thomas More. He brilliantly portrays this man as a sort of Christ figure who would simply rather risk losing his head for his religious beliefs through simple silence than conform to all the corrupt politics that are happening around him. He is also the ultimate personification of reason, logic, and nobility, almost like a 16th century version of Mr. Spock from Star Trek, except obviously wholly human and not Vulcan and not with this. Plus the trial scene and Thomas More's final moments at the very end of the film when he says his famous last words, "I'm commanded by the king to be brief, and since I am the king's obedient subject, brief I will be. I die his majesty's good servant, but God's first." Shortly before his execution are among some of the most beautiful and magnificent set of sequences ever put to film. If you are into history, especially Tudor history like myself, and or religion, or even interested in watching a really good costume drama, I would very, very highly recommend that you give this film a good watch. But if you are not into history, or just think that historical dramas in general are just tiresome, tedious, and just plain boring, then this movie is not going to be for you, quite frankly. In conclusion, my overall rating for A Man for All Seasons it's just going to be a perfect 10 out of 10. Now, feel free to leave a comment in the section below and let me know your individual thoughts on A Man for All Seasons, and whether or not you think it deserved to win Best Picture. Plus, feel free to subscribe to my channel as always. And until my next video, which is going to be a review of another Best Picture Oscar winner, being 1998's Shakespeare in Love. Do take care, everyone, and fare thee well.